There are people in this world who give so generously, so completely, that they forget they too need to receive. They smile at everyone, while their own joy slowly fades. They light up every room they enter, yet return home to darkness. This is the story of such a woman, a story that perhaps mirrors your own heart, or the heart of someone you love. It's a story about the painful beauty of learning that you cannot save the world if you let yourself drown in the process. In a small town cradled by gentle hills, where morning mist rolled down like whispered secrets and evening stars appeared one by one like promises, there lived a woman named Leila. Her name meant night in the old language, but to everyone who knew her, she was pure light. Not the harsh, blinding kind that makes you look away, but the soft, warm glow of a candle that draws you near, that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel seen. Everyone in that town knew Leila, not because she had done anything extraordinary in the eyes of the world, not because she had wealth or fame or power, but because she possessed something far rarer. She had a heart that could not turn away from suffering. When Mrs. Chen down the street fell ill with fever, it was Leila who appeared at her door with steaming soup and fresh bread, still warm from the oven. When young Timothy lost his father and didn't know how to navigate his grief, it was Leila who sat with him in silence, hour after hour, until he finally found the courage to cry. When the community center needed volunteers for the children's program, it was Leila who stayed late into the night, cutting paper stars and painting rainbows on the walls. People said she was an angel, a saint, a blessing. They said the town was lucky to have her. They said she had a gift. And perhaps she did. But what no one saw, what no one asked about, was the cost of that gift. Behind the door of her small cottage, where roses climbed the walls and honeysuckle sweetened the air, there was a different story. A story of cold dinners eaten alone, of tears shed in the shower where no one could hear, of a heart that grew a little more tired with each passing day. Leila's home was filled with photographs of other people's happy moments, events she had helped organize, celebrations she had made possible. But in none of those pictures did she appear. She was always behind the camera, always in the background, always the one making sure everyone else's story had a happy ending, while her own story remained unwritten. Every morning, Leila woke before the sun. While the world still slept, she would sweep her small yard, breathing in the cool air that smelled of earth and possibility. She tended her garden with the same gentle attention she gave to everything, whispering to her flowers as she watered them, encouraging them to grow, to bloom, to be beautiful. Then she would walk next door to check on Aunt Sarah, an elderly woman who had no family left, whose children had moved to distant cities, and whose husband had long since passed. Leila would make sure she had taken her medicine, would prepare her breakfast, would sit with her for a few precious minutes before rushing off to her real job. Leila taught at the village school, a small building with creaky floors and windows that rattled in the wind, where children from all the surrounding farms came to learn. She taught them to read and write, yes, but more than that, she taught them to dream. She told them stories of distant places, of people who had changed the world, of the magic that exists in books and imagination. Her students adored her. Every morning, they would run to greet her, their small voices calling, "Miss Leila, Miss Leila," like a chorus of joy. She would smile at them, that soft, gentle smile that had become her signature, though if you looked closely, you might have noticed that the smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. After school, when other teachers went home to their families, Leila stayed. She helped students who struggled. She decorated bulletin boards. She planned lessons late into the evening. Then she would visit the sick, counsel the troubled, help whoever needed helping. By the time she finally returned to her cottage, the sky would be dark, the stars would be bright, and her body would feel like it was made of stone. She would sit at her small kitchen table, looking at the empty chair across from her, and wonder when her life had become so full of everyone else and so empty of herself. The truth that Leila didn't want to face, the truth she pushed down every time it tried to surface, was this: she was disappearing. Not physically, not in a way anyone could see, but in the way that matters most. She was becoming a hollow vessel, a channel through which love and care flowed to others, but never to herself. She told herself it didn't matter, that her happiness came from helping, that she didn't need what others needed. But our bodies, wise as they are, have a way of speaking truth when we refuse to listen. It started small, the signs that something was wrong. A dizzy spell here, a forgotten meal there, nights when sleep wouldn't come, no matter how exhausted she felt. One afternoon in the middle of a lesson, as Leila was writing on the blackboard, the chalk slipped from her fingers. The room tilted, the children's faces blurred, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Her colleague, Mrs. Peterson, rushed to steady her, concern etched across her face. "Leila, you're pale as a ghost. You need to see a doctor. You need to rest." But Leila shook her head, forcing that familiar smile back onto her face. "I'm fine," she said, the two most dangerous words in the English language. "There's just so much to do. The annual school fair is next week, and I promised I would organize everything. I'll rest after that. But after is a cruel word. It's always just out of reach, always one more task away, always tomorrow, next week, next month, never now." The school fair arrived like a storm, and Leila was at the center of it all, orchestrating everything with the precision of a conductor and the determination of someone trying to prove something to herself. She set up every stall, coordinated every activity, made sure every child had a role, every parent felt welcome, every detail was perfect. The day of the fair was beautiful. Music drifted through the air, children laughed and played, the whole village came together in celebration. Everyone was having the time of their lives, everyone except Leila. As she was arranging the last table, adjusting the tablecloth just so, Leila felt something break inside her. Not her heart exactly, but something just as vital. Her legs, which had carried her through countless acts of service, simply gave up. They buckled beneath her like trees in a storm, and she fell, not with drama or noise, but with the quiet surrender of someone who had been falling for a long time and had finally reached the ground. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the blue sky above, vast and indifferent and beautiful. When Leila opened her eyes again, she wasn't under the sky anymore. She was in a hospital bed, surrounded by white walls and the antiseptic smell of medicine and the soft beeping of machines. A needle was taped to her wrist, connected to a bag of clear fluid. A nurse moved quietly nearby, checking charts, adjusting things. When the doctor came in, his face was kind but firm, the face of someone who had seen this story too many times before. "You fainted from exhaustion," he told her gently. "Your body simply shut down. You're severely anemic, dehydrated, and your stress levels are dangerously high. Miss Leila, your body is screaming for rest, and your heart needs healing." Leila tried to protest, tried to say something about the school, about her responsibilities, about all the people who needed her. But the doctor held up his hand. "Everything will wait," he said softly. "Everything except your health. You've been giving and giving from a cup that's been empty for a long time. You can't pour from an empty cup, Miss Leila. At some point, you have to refill it, or there will be nothing left to give." Those words hung in the air like a revelation, like a truth she had been running from her entire life. You can't pour from an empty cup. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Leila had no response. She, who always had words of comfort for others, who always knew what to say, was speechless. That evening, as the hospital settled into its nighttime quiet, a nurse brought Leila a small gift. It was a simple glass jar with a single wildflower inside, its petals a brave yellow against the sterile white of the room. "One of your students left this for you," the nurse said with a smile. "His name is Amir." Leila's eyes filled with tears. Amir was one of her quietest students, a shy boy with enormous eyes and a gentle soul, the kind of child who felt everything deeply but said little. The next morning, Amir came to visit with his mother. He stood at the foot of her bed, fidgeting with his hands, his eyes worried. "Miss Leila," he whispered, "please get well soon. We all miss you so much." Leila smiled through her tears. "I will, sweetheart. Thank you for the beautiful flower." Amir hesitated, looking at his mother for encouragement, then said something that would echo in Leila's heart for the rest of her life. "My mother says," he began slowly, carefully, as if handling something precious and fragile, "that you have to love yourself the same way you love everyone else. Otherwise, you'll run out of love." The words hit Leila like a wave, washing over her, through her, changing something fundamental in their wake. This child, this beautiful, wise child, had spoken a truth that all the adults in her life had either not seen or not dared to say. One afternoon, young Amir came to visit her after school. He looked around her cottage, at the paintings on the walls, the books on the shelves, the flowers in vases, and then his eyes fell on the chair. That chair that had always been empty, that Leila used to stare at during her loneliest evenings. "Miss Leila," he asked with the curiosity of the young, "why do you keep that chair empty? No one ever sits there." Leila looked at the chair for a long moment, then smiled. "That chair," she said softly, "is for me. It's my reminder. Whenever I start to forget myself again, whenever I start to disappear into everyone else's needs, I sit in that chair. I breathe. I remember who I am. I remember that I matter too." Amir nodded solemnly, not fully understanding perhaps, but sensing the importance of her words. That chair became a symbol in the village, a reminder that even the kindest hearts need a place to rest. Years flowed by like water, gentle and inevitable. Leila continued to teach, continued to help, continued to be a light in her community. But now she was also a light to herself. The story of her transformation spread beyond the village. People came from other towns to meet the woman who had learned to love herself. They wanted to know her secret, wanted to understand how she had found balance. And Leila would tell them, gently, that there was no secret, no magic formula. There was only the decision, made again and again, every single day, to include yourself in your own circle of compassion. To understand that you cannot heal the world from a place of your own woundedness. To accept that loving yourself isn't selfish, it's the only way to truly love others without resentment, without exhaustion, without losing yourself in the process. Now, as this story comes to its close, I want to speak directly to you, dear reader, dear listener, dear tired heart. Perhaps you see yourself in Leila's story. Perhaps you too are someone who gives and gives and gives until there is nothing left. Perhaps you too have learned to say yes when every fiber of your being wants to say no. Perhaps you too have forgotten that your own happiness, your own health, your own heart matters just as much as everyone else's. If this is you, then please, please listen. You deserve your own kindness. You deserve your own time. You deserve your own love. This isn't selfishness. This is survival. This is wisdom. This is the truth that will set you free. One afternoon, young Amir came to visit her after school. He looked around her cottage, at the paintings on the walls, the books on the shelves, the flowers in vases, and then his eyes fell on the chair. That chair that had always been empty, that Leila used to stare at during her loneliest evenings. "Miss Leila," he asked with the curiosity of the young, "why do you keep that chair empty?" "No one ever sits there." Leila looked at the chair for a long moment, then smiled. "That chair," she said softly, "is for me. It's my reminder. Whenever I start to forget myself again, whenever I start to disappear into everyone else's needs, I sit in that chair. I breathe. I remember who I am. I remember that I matter too." Amir nodded solemnly, not fully understanding perhaps, but sensing the importance of her words. That chair became a symbol in the village, a reminder that even the kindest hearts need a place to rest. Years flowed by like water, gentle and inevitable. Leila continued to teach, continued to help, continued to be a light in her community. But now she was also a light to herself. The story of her transformation spread beyond the village. People came from other towns to meet the woman who had learned to love herself. They wanted to know her secret, wanted to understand how she had found balance. And Leila would tell them, gently, that there was no secret, no magic formula. There was only the decision, made again and again, every single day, to include yourself in your own circle of compassion. To understand that you cannot heal the world from a place of your own woundedness. To accept that loving yourself isn't selfish, it's the only way to truly love others without resentment, without exhaustion, without losing yourself in the process. Now, as this story comes to its close, I want to speak directly to you. Dear reader, dear listener, dear tired heart. Perhaps you see yourself in Leila's story. Perhaps you too are someone who gives and gives and gives until there is nothing left. Perhaps you too have learned to say yes when every fiber of your being wants to say no. Perhaps you too have forgotten that your own happiness, your own health, your own heart matters just as much as everyone else's. If this is you, then please, please listen. You deserve your own kindness. You deserve your own time. You deserve your own love. This isn't selfishness. This is survival. This is wisdom. This is the truth that will set you free. When Leila finally came home a week later, everything was the same. The same cottage, the same furniture, the same silence. But she was different. She stood in her doorway and looked at her life as if seeing it for the first time. She saw the empty chair, the cold kitchen, the wilted flowers she hadn't had time to water. She saw all the ways she had neglected the one person she should have cared for most, and she began to cry. Not the quiet, hidden tears she had shed before, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere ancient and wounded inside her. When the tears finally stopped, she whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry, Leila. I'm so sorry for forgetting you." That moment, that apology to herself, was the beginning of everything. Leila made a decision that day, not to stop being kind, not to stop helping others, but to include herself in the circle of her own compassion. It wasn't easy. Changing the habits of a lifetime never is. The first morning, she almost skipped breakfast to rush to Aunt Sarah's house, but she stopped herself. She sat down, made herself toast and tea, and ate slowly, tasting every bite. It felt strange, almost selfish, but she persisted. She bought herself a journal, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager full of dreams, and she began to write. At first, the words came haltingly, awkwardly, because she had forgotten how to think about herself. But gradually, page by page, she began to rediscover who she was beneath all the giving, beneath all the helping, beneath all the roles she had played. She started painting again, something she had loved as a young woman, but had abandoned as impractical, as self-indulgent. She set up an easel in her garden and painted the sunrise, the flowers, the hills in the distance. The act of creating something just for herself, with no purpose except joy, felt revolutionary. She began taking evening walks by the lake, watching how the orange sun melted into the water like honey, listening to the birds settling in for the night, breathing in the peace that she had forgotten existed. Slowly, like a flower that had been wilting finally getting water, her spirit began to revive. The tired lines around her eyes softened. The weight she had been carrying began to lift. Her heart, that exhausted, overlooked heart, began to glow again. To glow again. Her students were the first to notice the change. Miss Leila seemed different, they said. She smiled more, and when she smiled, it was real, it was bright, it was the smile of someone who was truly happy. Her voice was softer, but somehow stronger, filled with a peace that hadn't been there before. And then one day, something happened that shocked everyone. When asked to organize the spring festival, Leila said something she had never said before. "I can't do it right now. But I'd be happy to help with one specific aspect. Perhaps I could work on the decorations." People were stunned. They whispered among themselves. Leila said no. Can you believe it? She actually said no. Some were confused. Some were hurt. Some thought she had become selfish. But then they began to notice something else. Leila was happier. She was healthier. She was more present when she was with them, because she wasn't spread so thin. She had more to give because she was finally giving to herself too. Aunt Sarah, with the wisdom of her years, understood immediately. One afternoon, as Leila was helping her in the garden, the old woman looked at her carefully and said, "You look different these days, child." What changed? Leila thought for a moment, then smiled. "I started giving myself the same kindness I've always given to others. I started treating myself like someone worth caring for." Aunt Sarah nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, "that's the most important thing you could have learned. We teach people how to treat us by how we treat ourselves. All these years, you taught everyone that your needs didn't matter. Now you're teaching them something better." The months passed like pages in a beloved book, each one bringing new growth, new understanding, new peace. The village began to see Leila in a new light. She was still kind, still helpful, still the person you could count on. But now, there was a strength in her, a quiet dignity, a sense that she belonged to herself first. When someone came to her with a problem, she listened deeply, but she didn't lose herself in their pain. When someone asked for help, she gave what she could, but she no longer gave everything. Her life became like a candle that burned steadily, warmly, sustainably, instead of a bonfire that blazed brilliantly but quickly consumed itself. Her example, though she never preached it, became a teaching. People began to understand that self-care wasn't selfish. It was sacred. It was necessary. It was the foundation upon which all other care must be built.